The woman practically screeched, "That belongs to my son," while jabbing a finger at my newly revived 1870s log cabin, a place I'd lawfully purchased, paperwork squared away, cash on the barrel. Picture this. I'm gliding my hand over century-old hand-hewn beams, drawing in that warm breath of oiled cedar when Vivian Caraway strides across my boundary line. Her heels rattle on my fresh porch planks like a burst of gunfire as she brandishes crumpled documents in my face. "My Mason deserves this inheritance," she yells, her piercing voice slicing through the mountain air. Here's what sets me ablaze. I bought this property fair and square at a county auction. Proper legal sale, valid deed, zero hiccups. But Vivian, she had the HOA board tucked in her blazer pocket and 20 years of steamrolling neighbors who dared resist her rule. What she didn't realize was that I'd just uncovered something in the cabin's concealed cellar that would obliterate her fabrications entirely. What would you do if your dream restoration turned into someone else's sudden family inheritance? Drop a comment with where you're watching from and whether your HOA has ever tried anything this outrageous. Let me rewind and show you how this entire fiasco began. My name's Nolan Mercer, and 6 months ago, I was a burned-out software consultant crawling through the world's ugliest divorce in Portland. You know that sensation when life nails you like a freight train hauling your ex's attorney invoices? Yeah, that was me. My grandfather had been a carpenter, one of those old-school artisans who could conjure wonders with nothing but hand tools and patience. When he passed, he left me a modest nest egg and a maxim. Good work takes time, son. Measure twice, cut once, and never let bullies shove you around. So, when I spotted this listing, historic 1870s cabin, 2.3 acres, needs restoration, $85,000. Something clicked. The photos showed hand-hewn Douglas fir beams resting on an original stone footing inside Cedar Ridge Preserve, a gated enclave of 47 homes in the Cascadia Range. The seller was the county. The prior owner, reclusive elder Arthur Renford, had died intestate. No family, no heirs, just this relic sitting idle while probate ground along. I drove up on a fog-draped morning, the scent of pine needles and damp soil hitting me like nature's antidepressant. The cabin perched on a gentle slope, ringed by evergreens that had probably witnessed the Civil War. When I ran my palm along those massive logs, I could feel generations of craftsmanship in each hand-cut joint. The county auction was simple. A few contractors showed, clocked the workload, and bailed. Me, I saw therapy with a roof, made the top bid, and left with a deed, rusty keys, and the biggest project of my life. The first few weeks were pure bliss. Stripping old chinking, treating logs, confirming the stone base was as solid as my ex's prenup demands. That's when I uncovered the hidden root cellar beneath the kitchen boards. Original storage carved into bedrock. And there, wrapped in oilcloth behind a loose stone, sat Arthur Renford's leather journal. Pages, yellowed yet legible, recording mountain life in neat script. Most entries were ordinary. Weather, repairs, wildlife notes, but sprinkled throughout were references to VC, and those lines sketched a darker tale of deceit, skimming, and pilfered lumber deals. Enter Vivian Caraway, HOA president, neighborhood despot, and owner of the largest McMansion in Cedar Ridge Preserve. Picture a 800-square-foot monument to suburban excess, crowned with a manicured lawn that probably needed a NASA irrigation plan. She lived there with Raymond, a retired bank VP, and their 28-year-old son, Mason, unemployed and apparently treating it like his career. Week 3 of restoration. The crunch of gravel announced Vivian's BMW like an air raid siren. She emerged in a business suit that cost more than my tool budget, clipboard primed for combat. "You're the new owner?" Not a question, an indictment. Nolan Mercer. I offered my hand. She inspected it like evidence at a forensic lab. "We need to discuss your permit violations." I blinked. "Ma'am, I have county permits, Building department said HOA approval wasn't needed for restoration. Her smile could have flash-froze hellfire. "Mr. Mercer, you don't understand Cedar Ridge Preserve. This community has standards." Then landed the bombshell that shifted the ground under my boots. Arthur Renford was my late husband's business partner back in the 60s. They had an understanding. This property would remain in the family. My son, Mason, has moral rights to this cabin. The audacity hit me like her cloying floral perfume mingling with fresh sawdust. She truly believed her sob story granted her a legal hold on my place. "You bought stolen goods," she pressed, voice climbing. "I'm giving you one chance to do the right thing. Sell to Mason for what you paid, $85,000. No profit from our family's loss." When I politely declined, the mask fell away. "Then you'll face the consequences. Work stops immediately pending architectural review. $500 daily fines until compliance. And if you fight me, there are attorneys who specialize in removing problematic residents." Standing there while this woman threatened my lawful project and claimed imaginary inheritance rights, I realized my quiet mountain refuge had just turned into a battlefield. Belinda wasted no time turning her threats into reality. 3 days after our tense encounter, I found a certified letter in my mailbox that made my morning coffee taste like battery acid. Notice of architectural review violations screamed across the top in blood-red letters. Apparently, she'd founded something called the Heritage Preservation Committee, which I quickly learned consisted of exactly 3 people: Vivian herself, her sister-in-law Diane, and her neighbor Mrs. Carles, whose chief qualification seemed to be nodding in enthusiastic agreement whenever Vivian opened her mouth. The so-called violation report stretched 14 pages of bureaucratic torture. My crimes? Installing modern electrical outlets instead of keeping the original knob and tube wiring that could have turned my cabin into a historical bonfire. Updating plumbing so I wouldn't need an outhouse in January. And my personal favorite, adding non-period LED lighting instead of kerosene lanterns and the constant flirtation with carbon monoxide poisoning. The irony burned worse than the smell of Vivian's cigarettes drifting across my property line. Her McMansion boasted a hot tub, granite counters, and enough exterior lighting to guide aircraft. But somehow, my painstakingly authentic restoration was destroying community character. So I did what any sane person would, fought back with research. That weekend at the County Historical Society, a kind librarian named Margaret helped me uncover gold. Original 1870s photographs of my cabin, county records proving no HOA existed when it was built, and documentation showing my restoration matched historical accuracy better than anything else in Cedar Ridge Preserve. But Arthur's journal held the real ammunition. Those mysterious VC references began snapping into focus when I read an entry from 1968. VC tried another trick today, caught him selling our lumber to his own customers while blaming equipment failures for shipment delays. Man's got no conscience. Good thing I keep records, including the insurance papers he thinks nobody knows about. The musty scent of old leather mixed with my wood stain that evening as the puzzle pieces aligned. Victor Caraway, Vivian's late husband, had been skimming profits and selling their joint lumber stock off the books. Arthur documented everything, and Vivian was terrified of what else might emerge from the cabin's hidden recesses. That's when Ruby Castellan made her appearance. A tough-as-nails neighbor, she shuffled over during my evening cleanup, her practical shoes crunching gravel as she looked around like a Cold War spy. "Son, you're stepping into a hornet's nest," she warned. "That woman's got more schemes than a carnival con artist." Ruby broke down Vivian's whole playbook. Manufacture violations, apply pressure, then force below-market sales to family or allies. Past victims included a teacher driven out over fake pool infractions and a veteran harassed because his memorial flag allegedly violated aesthetic standards. She runs a board through relatives and bribes, Ruby explained. Been ruling this place like a dictator for years. I remembered something from my divorce lawyer and the property rights law I'd studied when my ex tried to claim my grandfather's tools. Turns out HOAs can't retroactively enforce architectural rules on existing structures. So-called grandfather clauses protect legitimate improvements. The logic's simple. You can't invent rules just to torment someone you dislike. Meanwhile, Vivian's psychological warfare intensified. Daily inspections, where she photographed every nail and screw from my boundary line. Phony noise complaints during legal construction hours. Anonymous flyers warning neighbors about outside agitators threatening property values. The strangest sight was watching her performance each evening. Pacing around, snapping pictures with the focus of a documentary filmmaker, occasionally muttering and gesturing toward my perfectly lawful restoration, as though presenting evidence of war crimes. Then Marcus and Diana Price approached me, the young couple 3 houses down who looked like survivors of the same torment. "We're next," Marcus admitted, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Pool permit irregularities and fence height violations. We just wanted you to know some of us see what she's really doing." The final escalation came that Thursday when Vivian appeared with 2 board members while I was cleaning the cellar. I was simply removing a century and a half of debris when she started shrieking about unauthorized excavation. "You're violating county ordinances," she declared, demanding immediate access for inspection. But Arthur's journal had taught me something crucial about handling bullies. Document everything, stay calm, and never hand them ammunition. My grandfather's advice echoed in my mind. Measure twice, cut once, and never let anyone push you round on your own land. "Ma'am," I said, voice steady even as my pulse hammered, "I'm cleaning an existing space. No excavation, no permits required, and absolutely no unauthorized entry onto my private property." The expression that flickered across her face said it all. This wasn't about regulations or community pride. It was about control, and she was furious that her intimidation routine wasn't working. That's when it hit me. Vivian had been winning these wars for years because no one had fought her correctly. But I wasn't just anyone. I was a man with nothing left to lose, and a growing stack of evidence that would make her deeply regret ever starting this fight. Vivian's next strike landed where it hurt most, my wallet and my schedule. Monday morning brought County Building Inspector Jake Morrison to my driveway, clipboard in hand, and an apologetic look plastered on his face. "Sorry about this, Mr. Mercer," he said, clearly uncomfortable. "We've had a formal complaint about unauthorized foundation work. Someone's alleging you're making structural modifications without permits." I could feel the frustration bubbling up. "That's fiction," I replied. "I was cleaning an existing space, not digging new footings." But regulations required a full reinspection, halting my work for 2 weeks while paperwork crawled through the bureaucracy, slower than Mason searching for employment. The delay fed Vivian's rumor campaign. Neighbors began whispering about my finances, wondering if I could afford proper permits or if I was cutting corners to save money. The crisp mountain air carried gossip faster than pollen in spring, but my messy divorce had taught me something crucial about battling dirty opponents. Hire professionals who know the rules. That's when I found attorney Sarah Jules, a specialist in HOA harassment cases. Her consultation uncovered a beautiful truth. Vivian's legal footing is weaker than wet cardboard, Sarah said, scanning my documentation. She's running on bluff and intimidation. Keep photographing everything, file counter complaints with the State Oversight Board, and let her own mistakes stack up. In property law, the person with the best records usually wins. I'd learned that lesson during my divorce when my ex-wife's lawyer tried claiming ownership of my grandfather's workshop tools. Meticulous documentation, receipts, photos, witnesses. saved me thousands. So now I applied that same precision to Vivian's campaign of harassment. I requested HOA meeting minutes and found accidental gaps during every forced property sale. Missing records whenever someone challenged board authority and financial statements showing heritage fund payments to family-run businesses. The pattern was as clear as a mountain stream. Then came the day I caught Mason red-handed. Thursday afternoon, returning from the lumberyard, I spotted him strolling around my cabin like an appraiser. Gravel crunched beneath his designer sneakers as he tried to look casual. "Just checking out my future property," he said, dripping smug entitlement. But here's a twist. He had keys. Not just wandering where he didn't belong, but actual access to my locks. When I demanded an explanation, his answer exposed the full depth of their delusion. "Mom gave them to me," he said. "She said the last owner left them with the HOA for emergencies, and since this is really our family's place anyway." The audacity was breathtaking and legally actionable. HOAs don't hold emergency keys to private homes. That's called breaking and entering. Vivian had somehow convinced her son that imaginary inheritance rights extended to real-world access. Meanwhile, Arthur's journal continued yielding secrets each night as I read by the warm glow of an oil lamp. One entry from 1967 described Victor Carraway's equipment failures that delayed deliveries while he secretly sold lumber off the books. Arthur mentioned insurance papers hidden in the foundation stones where Victor's greed can't reach them. That line echoed in my head as I cleaned the cellar. Insurance papers hidden in foundation stones. My grandfather used to say mountain folks knew how to protect what mattered most. I began to suspect Arthur had left something waiting to be found. While I focused on the cellar, Vivian staged her next maneuver. She convened an emergency HOA meeting with all the subtlety of a political coup, inviting only her supporters and conveniently excluding dissenters. The agenda targeted my restoration specifically, inventing retroactive architectural guidelines and forming a heritage fund to bankroll lawsuits against disruptive residents. Public records told a damning story. The so-called Heritage Fund's legal expenses were routed to Vivian's cousin's discount law firm, her sister-in-law's fake consulting company, and heritage research payments that matched Mason's car installments to the dollar. The smell of corruption was thicker than varnish fumes. Pete Kowalski, the old lumberyard owner, filled in the history. Arthur Renford was an honest craftsman, kept spotless records, Pete told me. Victor Carraway had a reputation for creative invoicing and shortchanging clients. That woman's been poisoning good folks' names for 20 years. He offered materials at cost, adding, "About time somebody stood up to her." The harassment soon turned physical. Friday morning, I arrived to find shattered windows, scattered tools, and graffiti splashed across my restored logs. The sharp tang of spray paint polluted the mountain air. There was no forced entry. Whoever did it had keys. An anonymous note under my windshield said it plainly: "Leave now, or worse happens next." Luckily, Marcus had anticipated this. His IT background led him to install hidden cameras around my property. The footage captured everything. Mason using keys to enter, methodically trashing the place, then calling his mother. "Just mess things up like you said. Looks like a break-in, nothing too obvious." It was all there. Audio proof of conspiracy between mother and son, video of trespassing and vandalism, time-stamped evidence of a systematic campaign. When the sheriff's deputy arrived to take my report, I wasn't worried about delays. I was assembling an airtight case that would end Vivian's tyranny for good. Even her allies began to shift uneasily. Ruby publicly condemned the vandalism, and several neighbors privately expressed their disgust. But Vivian doubled down, blaming me for attracting criminals through reckless renovation. Standing in my vandalized cabin that evening, Reading her latest letter demanding an emergency community vote about my threat to neighborhood safety, I understood the truth. Vivian wasn't just controlling. She was unhinged. And unhinged people always make fatal mistakes. Vivian's desperation escalated into absurdity with a legal stunt so laughable it could have aired on late-night TV. Her cut-rate attorney cousin served me a cease-and-desist letter claiming my restoration violated a historical preservation easement that existed only in their imagination. The demand was audacious: $25,000 bond pending resolution, plus an immediate halt to all work. 6 pages of pseudo-legal gibberish wrapped in threats of asset seizure that would have made a loan shark proud. Sarah's reaction was priceless. "This is like being sued by someone who thinks they own the moon," she said, smirking as she dissected their nonsense. His law license must be hanging on by duct tape and desperation. While Sarah plotted our counterattack, I focused on Arthur's cryptic line about the insurance papers. Following his clues, I began examining the foundation stone by stone. One Wednesday afternoon, flashlight in hand, I discovered a deliberately loose slab near the eastern wall. Inside sat a weathered tin case containing documents that changed everything. Insurance records from 1967 showing Victor Caraway had filed claims for lumber lost in a mill fire. The exact inventory Arthur's journal said Victor had sold privately weeks before. It was undeniable proof of fraud. Ancient, yes, but devastating to the Caraway family's narrative. The evidence vindicated Arthur's integrity and explained Vivian's terror. She knew her husband's crimes were buried literally beneath this cabin. And I was digging them up piece by piece. Then Mason took his harassment campaign public. He started showing up at Murphy's Cafe, where I worked remotely, staging loud phone calls about family property stolen by greedy developers. His performance would have won a daytime Emmy. Tragic heir battling heartless outsider. The barista, a college kid named Tyler, eventually pulled me aside, barely holding back laughter. "Dude, that guy rehearses his sob story between customers. Exact same lines every time." Their social media smear effort was just as pathetic. Posts titled "Help Mason Reclaim His Family Heritage," featuring moody selfies outside my cabin. The comments were flooded with fake accounts parroting the same grammar mistakes, all expressing outrage about greedy outsiders. It was digital theater at its worst. Vivian's most personal attack came next. She tracked down my ex-wife Claire and attempted a fishing expedition that backfired spectacularly. Claire called me that night, her tone caught between curiosity and disgust. "Some lunatic from Washington spent 20 minutes asking about your drinking habits, mental state, and whether you'd ever been violent." She said she was gathering evidence for a case. During our divorce, I'd learned to document every interaction because desperate people twist facts into weapons. That habit saved me again. Claire told me she'd recorded the entire call. "I told her you were stubborn and obsessed with antique tools," she said, "but violent? Not even close." Then I asked why she was investigating my ex-husband. She hung up so fast I almost laughed. Meanwhile, Sarah's deeper research uncovered something jaw-dropping. The Cedar Ridge Preserve HOA hadn't legally existed for 2 years. Its state registration had lapsed, rendering every fine violation and vote null and void. "They've been operating as an unregistered entity," Sarah explained, flipping through the paperwork. "That means every single action they've taken is legally meaningless. Every letter, every threat, pure theater." By now, Marcus's upgraded security system had chronicled 47 separate incidents of harassment, each one neatly timestamped. Mason's break-ins were clearly part of an organized scheme, not random mischief. Vivian's next escalation proved it beyond doubt. One afternoon, she staged her grandest deception yet: a gas emergency requiring immediate inspection of my property. She arrived with Mason and 2 board members in tow, carrying a device that beeped dramatically near my foundation. "Critical safety issue," she announced, pretending concern. "Several neighbors reported gas odors. We need immediate access." But years of debugging code had taught me to trust evidence, not theatrics. The gas detector was actually a smoke alarm with a dying battery, its frantic beeping pure performance. County dispatch confirmed no neighbors had reported leaks, and my cameras caught the entire charade in a perfect high definition. Vivian coaching Mason, whispering, "Place those violation tags on the outlets while I distract him. Make it look official." Deputy Rodriguez arrived minutes later. Sarah had predicted an escalation and prearranged law enforcement standby. The deputy's body camera recorded everything as he caught Vivian red-handed planting fake violation stickers on my walls. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "we need to talk about filing false emergency reports and attempted fraud." Meanwhile, Ruby's Facebook livestream captured the whole fiasco for the neighborhood. Within hours, the video exploded online. Comments flooded with outrage, disbelief, and relief. People finally saw the truth. Vivian's mask was off, and even her loyalists couldn't defend her anymore. That moment marked the turning point. The fabricated emergency, the planted evidence, the police response, it was the final nail in her self-built coffin. Multiple agencies opened investigations, her authority crumbled overnight, and, for the first time in months, the mountain air around my cabin felt clean again. Standing on my porch that evening, watching the deputy's taillights fade into the twilight, I realized the war was almost over. Vivian had transformed from a feared neighborhood tyrant into a desperate criminal whose schemes were unraveling faster than a cheap sweater in a spin cycle. The next morning brought a call that tasted sweeter than any coffee I'd brewed in months. "I found the smoking gun," Sarah said, her voice thrumming with victory. She'd uncovered the original 1960s partnership dissolution papers, Victor Carraway's signature right there, renouncing all future claims to Renford properties. My cabin and its 2.3 acres were explicitly listed. Vivian had spent months screaming about family inheritance rights to land her husband had legally forfeited 6 decades earlier. Her entire crusade was built on a lie so deep she'd probably convinced herself it was truth. Then came the knockout blow from the state HOA Oversight Board. Their audit exposed the so-called Heritage Fund for what it really was, an embezzlement funnel. $8,000 in unauthorized transfers to Caraway accounts, Mason's car payments disguised as consulting fees, their Hawaiian getaway billed as heritage research, even Raymond's country club dues listed under community outreach. Sarah laid out the evidence on my kitchen table as morning sunlight glowed through the restored windows, illuminating our paperwork fortress. "This goes beyond civil harassment," she said, tapping the files. "We're looking at felony embezzlement. 5 to 10 years, minimum." Meanwhile, Mason's arrest set off a chain reaction that dismantled their entire facade. Security footage led to charges of breaking and entering, vandalism, and possession of drug paraphernalia, explaining his erratic behavior. Deputy Rodriguez summed it up grimly. "She's been using her own addicted son as a weapon. That's not control. It's exploitation." 2 board members resigned immediately after learning their votes had no legal weight. Vivian's sister-in-law faced accessory charges for knowingly helping her cook the books. The HOA was collapsing like wet cardboard. Then, as if Arthur himself had decided justice wasn't done yet, his will surfaced. It had been misfiled during probate and rediscovered after Sarah's document request prompted a county investigation. Inside was a $15,000 restoration trust dedicated to preserving the cabin, specifically excluding any Caraway descendants. To protect mountain heritage from those who would exploit it for personal gain, the clause read. He knew exactly who they were, the trust attorney said. Vivian's descent into madness accelerated as the walls closed in. She tried bribing officials, faked a bankruptcy filing, even threatened witnesses. Her husband, Raymond, weary and broken, finally turned state's evidence, revealing 2 decades of financial deceit. "I enabled her because I was afraid," he confessed. "But watching what she did to that man made me realize I'd become an accomplice to evil." The community transformed almost overnight. Property values soared as legitimate governance replaced tyranny. Ruby organized open meetings where neighbors actually talked instead of whispered. For the first time in 20 years, laughter drifted through Cedar Ridge again. Standing in my finished cabin, running my hand across Arthur's carved mantel, I realized my restoration had become more than wood and nails. It was proof that patience and principle could rebuild more than structures. But Sarah warned the battle wasn't over. "Desperate criminals get reckless," she said one afternoon as we mapped our final offensive across my dining table. The sunlight danced over files like war maps. "We'll pursue 3 fronts: criminal prosecution for embezzlement, civil damages for harassment, and an injunction to stop future abuse." Every fake violation, every intimidation attempt became a part of a comprehensive case. "Most homeowners don't realize," she added, "that when an HOA isn't properly registered, its members can be held personally liable. Vivian's about to lose her house, her savings, everything." Ruby's kitchen turned into our command center. The smell of her apple pie blended with the sound of strategy. Marcus managing encrypted communications, Diana drafting governance reforms, Pete offering his lumberyard for community gatherings. "We've created a blueprint," Marcus said, typing away. "This is how you defeat bullies, with documentation and teamwork." The Holbrook Trust, now renamed the Renford Fund, became the community's rallying point, funding real improvements like park benches, gardens, and walking trails. The contrast to Vivian's heritage scams couldn't have been clearer. The public hearing would be our final stand. County commissioners, media, investigators, all would be there. But Vivian, unhinged and cornered, launched one last smear campaign. She hired a sleazy investigator to dig through my divorce, spread rumors of addiction and instability, and flood social media with slander. Marcus traced the posts back to her IP address in minutes. The pièce de résistance. She called my ex-wife again, trying to coax false accusations. Claire recorded the entire exchange, another nail in Vivian's legal coffin. Then came the twist of poetic justice. Mason overdosed, survived, and confessed everything from his hospital bed. Vivian had drained his trust fund to finance her legal wars and promised him his inheritance once she reclaimed the cabin. Even he realized too late that she had spent his future on corruption. Raymond filed for divorce the next day. When Vivian resorted to bribery of public officials, offering cash to falsify violations, her fate was sealed. Law enforcement recorded every attempt. "Ma'am," Inspector Morrison told her, "that's felony bribery of a public officer. I'm required to report this immediately." Within weeks, state and federal investigators connected the dots. 3 counties affected by similar scams. Vivian wasn't just a neighborhood menace. She was part of a regional pattern of HOA fraud. My case became the linchpin that unraveled them all. Still, she tried one last trick, planting drugs in my mailbox to frame me. But Marcus's cameras caught her creeping through the darkness at 3 a.m., muttering to herself while slipping a bag into the slot. The footage, crystal clear, time-stamped with audio, ended her delusions permanently. "Planting evidence and filing false reports," Deputy Rodriguez said as he cuffed her. "That's a fast track to prison, ma'am." The courthouse hearing that followed was standing room only. Reporters crowded the aisles. 3 news crews filmed live. Ruby testified first, her voice carrying decades of frustration. She turned our neighborhood into a dictatorship, she said, steady and sure. Marcus presented the digital evidence, every photo, every recording. Gasps rippled through the gallery as Vivian's crimes played in high definition. When Vivian entered in an orange jumpsuit, the woman who once ruled through fear looked like a deflated puppet. She demanded to speak and delivered 15 minutes of rambling insanity about conspiracies, heritage, and divine injustice. The judge finally cut her off as she shrieked, "He stole our legacy." Sarah's closing presentation was surgical. The dissolution papers, the will, the embezzlement trail, all irrefutable. The district attorney read out the charges: racketeering, mail fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement, harassment, potential 20-year sentence. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. When the judge asked for final remarks, I looked her in the eye. "Mrs. Caraway," I said, voice steady, "you didn't lose an inheritance. You lost the right to terrorize your neighbors. This cabin didn't destroy your community. It saved it." Applause erupted, echoing through the hall as deputies restrained her from lunging at me. Months later, headlines across Washington blazed with the outcome: HOA tyrant, sentenced to 7 years federal, 4 state, $750K in restitution. Her husband received probation for cooperation. Mason entered rehab, later becoming a counselor. Cedar Ridge blossomed under Ruby's transparent leadership. Property values up, gardens blooming, laughter returning. The recovered funds built the Arthur Renford Memorial Workshop, where kids learned carpentry and respect for craftsmanship. Sarah's success turned her into a national expert on property rights. Netflix even aired Cabin Conspiracy, a documentary on our case that inspired reforms across 3 states. And me? I rebuilt more than a cabin. I rebuilt faith and fairness and community and standing tall against bullies. Every evening, when the sun sets behind the Cascades and light glows through my restored windows, I think of my grandfather's words. "Good work takes time, son. Measure twice, cut once, and never let anyone push you around." Sometimes the most important restoration isn't of wood or stone. It's of justice.